The crew John had found himself lumped with were of little help. They were freedom fighters that John had contacted prior to his rebirth. None of them knew who John was, only that he had leaked information in regards to the government they were fighting against. At least I had a bit of foresight, John thought to himself. Chances are John's rage was taking him toward a mutual enemy of the freedom fighters. However, their ultimate goal really was of no concern of his. Perhaps it would be mutually beneficial for both parties in the long run, but in the end, who knows? We arrive at the mountains and John finds a brief moment to breathe after exiting the helicopter. Everything had happened so quickly, and his world was still in shambles. The help John received was of little use to him other than a faster passage to where his rage took him. Having learned nothing from the anti-government cronies, John's rage burned even brighter now. He knew the mountain's trek would be guarded and dangerous, but he also knew that he must press on.
I made a mistake.
All units, assistance required on 7th and Jocelyn.
Zulu 5 on our way.
Foot soldiers, special forces, mechanized war machines. Nothing could stop John as he trekked the harsh mountain landscape. Clearly, this was a military installation of sorts, littered with helicopter landing pads and catwalks. The soldiers also seemed to come from little potholes that were dug into the mountainside. John paused a moment, thinking maybe he should see where it led, but now was not the time to be sidetracked. He had traveled this road many times in his previous life. You can call it muscle memory or whispers of days gone. Regardless, following the mountain path would take him to where he must go. His memory, while still jolted with displacement, grew clearer and clearer, and while alone with his thoughts, John knew that somehow he had a hand in creating this weaponized body of his. He wasn't certain, mind you, however, he knew the exact breaking points of the reactor on his chest. When his rage would reach a fever's pitch, he would unleash all that stored energy, like a bomb decimating all those who came near, as in the mountains, as it was in the city. Logically speaking, even if he didn't consciously know what this machine was, subconsciously, the answers were there. Still, the visions of a woman did not leave his mind, even as he pummeled his way through the various onslaughts of enemies before him, sometimes tossing whole platoons at them, but it was never enough, and they would all die. I'm getting close, John believed. Navigating through the mountains, John found himself in front of a long wire. Now, logic would dictate that this had to be a lift of some sort. However, John knew this wire of fate would lead him to the secret entrance of the base. It had to. If even the lift had a chance of returning, his rage propelled him forward, and he couldn't wait around to learn the truth. So once again, throwing caution to the wind, he propelled himself down the wire, and sure enough, he would be ambushed all along the way. His animal reflexes were much more advanced than what he initially believed. They allowed him to execute targets even moving at extreme speeds. On top of which, John found himself able to lift his body and attack the oncoming entities physically. Clearly, John had become peak human. Flying down through the mountains, destroying people, helicopters, and all who would stand in his way, John makes it to the entrance in his memories. He was almost to the origin of this nightmare. The forest fire had spread all the way to the valley, and in turn, he was ready to see it engulf everything inside. A large gate blocked his way in. Even his weapons were not enough to open it. As he fired his laser cannon, the force field absorbed his shots. Perhaps in his previous life, John had helped to design the force field for this mountain base. His foresight unfortunately working against him. The enemy was waiting for John as he would be assaulted by 2 helicopters. Taking immediate action, John dispatched one of the helicopters with ease.
On head, main gyro now! Switching on forward shield now. Target is inside.
Yet, when turning his attention to the other, unfortunately, the helicopter utilized the same force field as the door. Seemingly, John was facing off against 2 enemies from 2 different placements in time. The helicopter of the present and the hubris of his past. Dodging rockets, John zipped from side to side, taking damage at every turn. The helicopter pilot continued to bait John, and the rage was simply not enough to see this through. Was this it? Would it all end here at the precipice of the true nightmare that awaited inside? This hour, though, luck would not give up on John. A dodged missile was sent straight towards the secret base entrance. Upon the attack connecting, it created a large crater within the door. A chance. And upon this connection, a moment of clarity dissipated the rage. He may have designed the shields to protect against incoming laser attacks. However, perhaps to the hubris of his previous life, he didn't take into consideration high-caliber missiles. You know, as any of us would tend to forget. It was a chance, and he was willing to take it. John willingly allowed himself to become the prey to these missile barrages, and with each successful hit, the door caved in more and more. And to the pilot's hubris, they did enough damage to reveal the entrance tunnel and support beams for the entrance itself. John knew that he would never make it down the tunnel before going up into a fiery blaze, as the enemy had been going to extreme measures to eliminate him already. So he systematically cut down the support beams as he had done previously. Smashing and blasting, John cut the support beams, taking down the helicopter with it.
Mayday, mayday.
Stage complete.
Finally, John would get to the genesis of everything. The valley was ablaze by the rage of John Kane. He reached the last stronghold, preventing total devastation of the concrete forest. Sure enough, his hunters did not disappoint. The tunnel systems were narrow and claustrophobic. The air was thin, and it made it very, very hard to breathe. From here on out, John knew he would be hit with everything the enemy had left to throw at him. On the surface, forces were thinning out, as most of the sheep had either already been engulfed in the flame of rage or had used their better judgment fleeing this forsaken valley. All that remained within this deprived valley were the loyalists, and with that, he knew they would throw all they could to stamp out this fire once and for all. Although it felt like it would go on forever, John navigated through the tunnel systems and eventually stumbled upon a train system. The train was familiar. This was the right way. Equipped with jetpacks, enemies engaged John from a distance. Like flies, though, John systematically swatted every single one of them down and continued on his way.
Armageddon 13.
Even the fabled Armageddon 13 armored train made little difference in slowing down John, as in a previous life, and unbeknownst to John, he also had helped to develop this weapon. It wasn't long, though, before the enemies stopped hurling themselves into the inferno of John Kane. Was that it? Are they all dead? John wondered. But before he could allow himself a moment's breath, giant footsteps echoed throughout the tunnel, shaking not just the tracks, but the graphs embedded into John's techno-organic spine. A giant cybernetic organism was barreling towards John. In that moment, John knew, I created this. Everything John had fought up to this point, he had either a hand in creating or enhancing to a certain degree. John knew this as fact. He was being hunted by those he had most likely hunted, captured, and created before, or at the very least had gained some sort of benefit from John somehow, for better or worse. As he began to remember, the cybernetic organism lashed out in an attempt to end John's journey. John had no choice but to fight back. His creation gave him no remorse, taking any opportunity to swing at John while maintaining their momentum to keep with the train. However, it only seemed to be acting upon instinct. What life, if any, remained in this creature was scant at best. John took aim, but a shield protected the cybernetic organism from harm, similar to the tech he had already faced prior. It all began to become clear. The tech he made, the tech they utilize. The organism slashed at John, and still he could not find a way to break through the force field. However, so long as he was careful, the train would not derail. This was a dance John knew he couldn't partake in forever. And similar to the rooftop waltz he had already partaken in, John decided infinity was not in his list of choices he would accept. A moment of clarity once again within the rage. Remembering the fight with the helicopters, John knew that the force field he designed was still susceptible to physical damage. Once again, a somersault kick would also lead to his demise. So, taking notice of an overhead transport, he took aim and...
Malfunction detected.
It worked. He could, in fact, kill what was left of this thing. John continued for as long as he could. No remorse, no regrets, until finally the beast succumbed to its wounds. John turned and breathed a sigh of relief. However, his creation would in fact get the last laugh. Channeling his inner Arnold Schwarzenegger antagonist, the body of the cyborg detonates, destroying the tunnel system and nearly ending John's life. Although faint, he could hear the laughing of his previous creation.
Stage complete.
Overcome by the explosion and vast amounts of rage expending all at once to keep him alive, John succumbs to his wounds and drifts off to sleep, effectively shutting down. Although he was losing human consciousness rapidly, he found himself rebooting into a techno-organic world where his history, his past, and the truth about what he really was finally unlocked. Although the notion was sketchy at best, John was no longer human, but instead a hybrid of human, machine, and parts animal. All these things creating the ultimate version of humanity.